Unlike the majority of you guys here today, I didn't do an internship through this class. And as a result, a lot of the work that I did this summer wasn't always directly tied to environmental communication. And when I was making my presentation, I originally saw this as a disadvantage. I felt like I didn't have direction, I didn't have some initiative that I could focus on. But then it clicked for me that I could use my summer internship to my advantage. When I think of this summer, I don't only think of the amazing learning opportunities that I had, but also, the new friendships and the character growth that I acquired. But another thing that I did this summer, very late in the game, was download BeReal. And I'm sure many of you guys know what that already is, but for those that don't, it's a social media app that that has users post one unfiltered picture per day, no matter what that is. And I wanted to document my last summer as a college student and my last year of college as well. And I thought it would be the perfect opportunity for me to create a photo diary and to create a way to associate pictures with the memories that I experienced this summer. And so I thought it would be really fun for me to take you guys through my summer experience, in part through BeReal. So what did I do this summer? I was a full-time editorial intern for The Conversation US, a media publication that publishes journalistic articles written by scholars. So academics, professors, that kind of thing. And they really seek to inform and educate the general public about the news that goes beyond those headlines that you see in the Times or the Post. It's a publication that really emphasizes credibility, and it takes pride in its role as a bridge that connects the vast realm of academia with the everyday lives of people. As a fully remote intern, I had a lot of meetings that looked exactly like this. These were all pictures of the general morning meeting that I had, where we discussed a lot of upcoming articles to be published, things to be pitched, stuff like that. And as an intern, I was to work very, very closely with academic experts to thoroughly edit and fact-check their journalistic articles for publication. And this meant constant communication, whether that was over email, Zoom, or just through edits that I made on their pieces. And this summer, I was placed on the health desk, meaning a lot of my stories also looked like this. And I'm sure you can tell that they all have one thing in common, whether that's a biomedical engineer, a nutritionist, or even a psychologist. All of these articles make it very, very apparent to the reader who is writing the article and why they should trust them. And as someone who's been in that editor role before, I've been the science editor of The Sun for 2 years at this point, I came into this internship thinking my life would be exactly like this. Intense collaboration with scholars, working with them to tell the stories that they wanted to tell about their research or just their expertise on a specific topic of the fields that they were in. But I also thought that the editorial process would look like this, very linear, because that's what I experienced in the past. Making edits, having scholars resolve them, making a couple more edits, they would resolve them, and then the piece would be ready for publication. But that is not what I experienced. Instead of a linear kind of timeline, honestly, the editorial process at The Conversation kind of looked like that. There were times where I would just read an article and just become so incredibly overwhelmed because I didn't know where to start with the editing process. There were such big picture and small picture issues, whether that was structure stuff or just little syntactical or grammatical errors. And I was I just did not know that scholars did not know how to write in a way that was not typical of general academic writing. And academic writing is very different than journalistic writing. So I would make these edits, I would talk to my health editor, I would revise my own edits, then the professor or the author would respond, but they wouldn't respond to all of them. Then I would go back and be could you respond to my edits? And they would, but not actually. But it was just a lot of back and forth, a lot of scrapping paragraphs, a lot of writing completely new ones. It was just not what I'd expected when I'd taken up an editor role at this publication. And slowly, the Venn diagram that I showed you in the beginning started to look a lot more like this. I felt like the scholars would give me a rough draft that I would have to work and polish very intensely to get it ready for publication. But if there's anything that I've learned and realized, it's that balancing academic precision and accuracy and with journalistic clarity is hard to do. Very hard. And so I would sit in my favorite cafe, which I assure you I was there almost every single day, working on articles that I was assigned, and very much just my surprise, I was struggling. I'm not going to sit here and explain every little challenge that I faced as an intern, but I will explain the 3 ways that I was able to deal with them. Mongo's, that's the name of the cafe, was the birthplace of many of these lessons, and so I thought it would only be fitting to include some of those pictures of me sitting and working. One of them is with my sister. I was just very clearly not having a fun time, but For the first thing, the first thing that I had learned to do when I was working with these scholars was to allow for emulation. And I'm sure you're asking what exactly that means, but a lot of the times when I was editing their pieces, I would give them point blank comments. Can we make this lead a little bit more attractive or attention grabbing? Can we have a transition that flows to the next paragraph? Let's expand on this a little bit more. And a lot of the times, the stuff that I was getting back from my own feedback was not what I was looking for from these authors. And in hindsight, I completely see why, because my comments were just very vague. They were thoughts that I had that I typed out and expected them to listen to me and follow through. And I soon realized that the scholars unfamiliar with journalistic writing would need examples. So, by giving authors an example of what exactly I was looking for, I also gave them the opportunity to emulate it in their own writing, using phrases like "for instance" and giving them an example or something along the lines of made communication between an academic writer and me as an editor so much easier, because they were finally giving me what I was trying to tell them to do. And secondly, I also started actually embracing the story aspect of their writing. Oftentimes, I feel like structure and flow were definitely some of the more challenging aspects of editing a piece. Paragraphs just wouldn't flow together. They would go off on slight tangents that were relevant but didn't really work well. And fixing these errors were honestly the most time-consuming, because I would debate, do I need this paragraph here or should I do it a paragraph below? And does that change everything? And I honestly, for me, resolving that issue became a really big priority. And I thought that working to emphasize the narrative arc of these pieces, especially scientific articles, were something that I was trying to do. And so by halfway through the summer, I was sending scholars a paragraph on the topic that they were about to write about, with a list of key sections that I wanted them to include that we had talked about previously over Zoom, and it became a very common practice for me. It not only gave authors an outline for them to follow to make sure that they didn't miss out on anything, but it also showed them what I had expected of them when they were writing about a topic or just answering a specific scientific question. And the last one was conceptualizing the reader, which honestly I would argue was the most important lesson. Health and science usually grapple with a lot of complex and intricate theories and data, and tailoring that information to suit a reader's level of understanding is a really big challenge, especially for authors that don't necessarily do that in their everyday lives. But it's also incredibly important to transform the complexity of their language into something simple, because it enables a wider audience of people to grasp the concepts that these scholars were writing about. I think this was one of the things that scholars struggled with most, and one of the things that I sought to resolve the most. But telling an academic to add more context or more background here, or rewrite a jargony phrase, was just not working. They were not writing what a general reader would likely need to see to want or read and understand their content. It was a couple weeks into the internship when I began to point this out. Let the reader know why you're talking about sore throats in the summer. Why should a reader want to read your work? The reader should be able to understand every single sentence in your article without confusion. It was only when I began to point out this reader that these scholars began to see I began to see the changes that I wanted to see in this writing. Upholding accuracy is still possible while presenting information in a format that respects a reader's need for clear and reliable information. And when they would write with the readers in mind, academics were so much more likely to make their expertise accessible and relatable and relevant to the lives of everyday people. So, I did come into the summer confident with my abilities to navigate the editorial process with professors and academics and writers, but I was very, very surprised when I ended up with, I guess, a lot more challenges than I had expected. Learning how to navigate the relationship between editor and writer and just finding the balance between accuracy and accessibility was a challenge, but one that I truly believe has made me a better editor and most definitely a better journalist. So, thank you so much for listening.